Hey everybody, if you don't know me, my name is Kate, and I have been an ulcerative colitis sufferer for about 7 years now, almost to the date. And I wanted to make this video to kind of outline my story in honor of Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week, which is December 1st through 7th. And it also happens to coincide with my first hospitalization and the date of my official diagnosis, which is December 6th, so that's today. And so if you don't know, Crohn's and colitis are part of a family called IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease. And IBD is a form of autoimmune disease, which is where your body is attacking itself. And ulcerative colitis limits itself only to your colon, whereas Crohn's disease is the entire digestive tract. So I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis officially December 6th of 2010. So I guess before that, I probably started having symptoms around October-ish, which is pretty rare for this disease to have it kind of come on and like stay really strong. Usually you have bouts of remission, bouts of symptoms and stuff like that, and I never had that back and forth. It was just, you are now sick kind of thing. And so basically what symptoms-wise, I had extreme abdominal pain, like couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't move, really. And I also started bleeding. This caused me to lose a lot of blood, so my colon was bleeding. And so I was becoming anemic. I was not able to make enough blood for the amount that I was losing. And so that added to my exhaustion, and it got to the point where I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to go to dance. I didn't want to, I couldn't go to school. I couldn't stay through a whole day. I remember multiple times calling my mom or my dad being like, I can't do this, and having them have to come pick me up because I was laying on the bed in the nurse's office unable to move. So we did go see a couple of doctors, and they were basically like, you need to go see a specialist. Luckily, one of them knew of a guy at Children's Hospital Colorado who eventually became my doctor, who has followed me for the last 7 years. So I went to see him, and he had his speculations, was like, this could definitely be this autoimmune disease, and he kind of walked us through it, because probably like a lot of you, my mom and I had no idea what ulcerative colitis was. We had no idea what was going on with me. And so he kind of walked us through it, but was like, this also might be an infection. So he started me on some antibiotics, and those didn't do anything. And so the next step was a colonoscopy. So I had that colonoscopy, and keep in mind that I am forcing myself to keep dancing through this entire thing. So I'm like doing rehearsals. I'm doing a run of Nutcracker because for some reason I thought I could do it. And by the last weekend of shows, I had given my two other people my covers, my roles, because I couldn't do it. And the last show we had to pull someone in to do another spot of mine. I couldn't even perform. And the next day, my mom took me to urgent care. The receptionist, who isn't even, she might have been a nurse, I don't know at this point, but she was like, we can't help you here. You need to go to the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room. They started me on fluids. They took some blood. Essentially, they were like, if you were a patient of ours, you would need a blood transfusion right now. And I was like, okay. So in my brain, I was like, yeah, they'll just give me blood and we'll go on our merry way. And I was planning my dinner that night. I was so excited to get some chocolate cake because at this point I was also having really weird cravings. But what ended up actually happening was they couldn't give me the blood transfusion because I was 14, and at that point, the hospital we were at, since I was already a patient of Children's, which was only like 45 minutes away, they were essentially like, you need to go be treated there. So we waited for 6 hours in the emergency room for an ambulance to come drive me to the hospital, since they had to have specific transfer or patient transfer system, and my mom couldn't just drive me. So next thing I know, it's close to midnight, I think, and I'm being set up for my first blood transfusion. And at that point, I think that was about a liter of blood at least, maybe more. And I did end up having an infusion reaction, had a huge hive on my eye, a rash on my chest and my back. So that was super fun. And then I was in the hospital for the next week. And that was 7 years ago today was my first hospitalization. And so that's kind of what made me realize that I was not going to get over this. At that point, I still kind of had this in my head that we were going to take some medication and I was going to be just fine. And nothing, we were going to fix it. And when they started pumping blood into me, I kind of, my doctor had come in the next day and be like, you are really sick. And it wasn't until that moment where, like, the gravity of the possible situation really hit me. And so I was NPO for the next week, which means nothing by mouth. So I didn't have water. I didn't have, obviously, food or anything. And I was getting nutrition through an IV. And just to try and calm my system down, try not to put anything in it so it could take a breather. And after that, I was released from the hospital about a week later, spent Christmas and New Year's at home, but I remember being on the phone with my doctor right before New Year's or right after. Either way, I was readmitted to the hospital first week in January for another blood transfusion. So if you can imagine, like, that's how much blood I was losing, that I needed another liter of blood less than a month later. And so, I was still exhausted. I barely made it through finals. I don't even know, honestly, how I finished my freshman year of high school because I was so sick. I barely could sit through class. Thank God for my teachers. They were awesome through the whole thing. But, it was a rough time. And then come March, between January and March, we had started some higher level medications called immunosuppressants. And these were meant to suppress my immune system. And so I've actually been on these since then. And so I haven't really had an immune system because every time I've come off of them or tried to, I start to get really sick again. And so I was on those, and by March, they should have started ramping up and really yeah, we've cut your immune system out. Your colon is fine. Like, you're no longer attacking itself. But unfortunately, that didn't happen for me. And we were preparing. I had gone into the hospital, and my doctor was preparing me for an emergency colectomy the next day. Luckily, and I've only had to say this a couple of times, but very luckily, I had an infection called C. diff. And C. diff is a bacteria that naturally lives in your gut, and when it is allowed to keep growing and there's nothing to keep it in check, it will act like ulcerative colitis. And so, thankfully, at that point, we were able to get it under control enough to postpone we could only postpone it, but we postponed my colectomy for a couple of months until I was out of school. So I was able to finish my freshman year of high school, but it was the day after finals. I was in the hospital being prepped for a major surgery, which I guess a lot of freshmen can't say that. But yeah, I remember taking my biology final and being like, this time tomorrow, I'm going to be, hooked up to an IV and drinking all this clean out stuff. And then I was under for 6 hours. And I realized at this point, I haven't even talked about the steroids. So steroids are another thing that help inflammation. But they also, besides helping inflammation, they also have a lot of unfortunate side effects. One of them is called moon face. And that's essentially where, so you retain a lot of water when you're on steroids, and a lot of that water just happens to be retained in your face. So my face was probably like out to here. I had the hugest cheeks. I gained a lot of weight because steroids also make you have the largest appetite I've ever had in my life. Even though every time I ate, it hurt. I was always thinking about food. I was always planning my next meal. But I just have like pictures of me with just the fattest face. And it was embarrassing. And I was in my freshman year, and nobody understood what was going on with me. I wasn't super vocal about it at that point. I was like, people didn't know me. I didn't know what to say. But I come back from winter break from my hospital stay, and my face is just like, 3 times the size it was when I left, because I went from being super anemic and like under 100 pounds at 5'5" to, gaining almost 30 pounds plus in the course of a month. So there was also that. But anyway, back to where we were with my story. I did have a total colectomy. So you can live without a colon, fun fact, have been for 7 years. And so that was my first surgery, and when they take out your colon, it's usually done in 2 to 3 steps. I had mine done in 2 steps, it's supposed to be 2 steps, but essentially it was 2 steps. So the first step was they take out your entire colon, they build what's called a J pouch, and they attach your small intestine to the outside of your stomach, creating what's called an ileostomy. So essentially I had a bag strapped to my stomach. I can show you the scar if you really want to, where my I essentially went into a bag, and I had to, there's this whole slew of different products that I had no idea existed until I had to use them to survive. So I had an ileostomy for about 6 weeks, which, if you could imagine, was not fun. I also, at that point, was still on IV nutrition, and so I had a PICC line, which is a line that goes in through your left, usually, your left arm, and goes up and down into your heart and delivers nutrients and different vitamins directly into your heart to pump them out to your body. And so I went home with this, which was not a super fun time, and I had to carry around a backpack that was feeding me. So that was fun. And so I had my ileostomy takedown about 6 weeks later, where they reattached my small intestine. And then, I guess it was about, I want to say like 6 months later, I still was having these weird symptoms. I was still bleeding. I was still having these odd bouts of pain. Like, my inflammatory counts were still really high. And what we found out was essentially the surgeon had left a little bit too much of my colon in, that it was still fighting really hard, and my immune system just really hated my colon. And so I had another surgery to take out another, I think they said was 6 centimeters of my colon. So I'm now left with, I think, 2. And it still gives me trouble today. But we're not done with the end of my surgeries. So about a year later, something like that, a year and a half, I was having bouts of what is called anal prolapsing. So what this is, well, essentially, I had no scar tissue in my sacrum, which was my doctor and my surgeon were like, we don't know how this happened. We rarely ever see this, but essentially they count on scar tissue to hold your new small intestine and your new system in place, and I didn't build up any scar tissue there. And so we did rounds of what's called phenol shots to try and induce scar tissue, and that didn't really work. So we had to go back in and surgically attach my small intestine to my sacrum. And so that is the end of my abdominal surgeries, and here we are 7 years later, and I'm, live and relatively well. I still have to take immunosuppressants and different supplements and I have a probiotic that I basically just can't live without, and I still watch my diet. I'm on what's called a low fiber, low residue diet, and so essentially I can't eat fibrous food and stuff like whole nuts. I can eat nut butters, but can't eat whole nuts or like popcorn or anything with like a solid covering. And that's a whole nother story that I get rap about, like not eating healthy and not taking care of myself. But the truth is I have a completely different system than like 99% of the population. I can't eat what normal people can eat. It doesn't work. I am in pain. I am in the bathroom. So anyway, I just wanted to make this video. I know it's a little bit long. Hope you watched the whole thing. Obviously, if you were hearing this, you did. But I just wanted to make this to kind of share my story and what I've been through and how I've helped to overcome it. I mean, now I'm a professional dancer. Yeah, it's kind of crazy the things I've done, like, through all of my surgeries. I look back at it and I was like, I don't know how I did it, but I did. And, I trained professionally in Atlanta for 2 years. I came back to Boulder and am dancing professionally with this, the company attached to the studio I grew up with. Like, it's crazy the things have fallen in this way. And, now that I'm stable, and we're just going to see where it goes. But thank you so much. And please look into CCFA, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and other different Crohn's and Colitis foundations out there. And educate yourself. Ask me questions. If you want to know anything, I will happily tell you, make more videos and everything like that. But please share. I really want this to kind of get out there and people know what Crohn's and colitis really is all about, because it's not just having to go to the bathroom all the time. There's a lot more to it than that. So yeah, thanks so much for watching.